Hello and happy Earth Day to everyone. My name is Lindsay Martin and I'm part of the Neocon team, and I want to welcome you and thank you for joining us for our programming series on designing well. I'm first going to get some housekeeping items out of the way. So today's sessions qualify for accreditation and certificates will be emailed within 3 business days to everyone who stays on for the full session. More details on accreditation can be found on the Neocon website under programming. Also, the final 15 minutes of this session will be questions and answers, so please feel free to submit any questions via the Q&A tab, and make sure you put those questions in the Q&A tab and not the chat box. Feel free to comment in the chat box, but all questions should go into the Q&A tab so we can queue them up for our speaker at the end. So let's get started with a little background on our speaker. Eric tried to get me to read a funny bio for him, but his qualifications are way too impressive not to formally read through them. So I'm going to do just that. Eric Corey-Fried is an award-winning architect, author, and global speaker. As Senior Vice President of Sustainability for CannonDesign, he leads the healthcare, education, and commercial teams towards better and higher performing buildings for over 20 million square feet a year. For 2 decades, he was founding principal of Organic Architect, a visionary design leader in biophilic and regenerative design. His past roles include Vice President of the International Living Future Institute and Chief Community Officer of EcoDistricts, both nonprofits pushing innovative new paradigms for deep green buildings and communities. Eric is the author of 11 books, including Green Building and Remodeling for Dummies. In 2012, his firm was selected one of the 25 best green architecture firms in the US, and he was named one of the top 10 most influential green architects. In 2017, he was named one of Build's American Architecture's top 25. He holds a prestigious LEED Fellow Award from the Green US Building Council. And I cannot think of a better or more qualified person than Eric to speak on Earth Day about redefining a new normal for healthy buildings. So I will let Eric take it away.
Thank you, Lindsay. I feel like the groundhog on Earth Day, you know, that people only let me come out once a year. I'm going to share my screen here. And what I'm going to show you today is a kind of, well, it's new. So forgive me if the jokes don't go over well, but you're on mute anyway, so it doesn't really matter. I can't hear you. And as you heard, I'm Director of Sustainability at CannonDesign. CannonDesign is I'm so lucky to have the best job ever in that, you know, as a firm, we're working on so many things in so many areas, and we have a prefabrication division. We have a strategic consulting team. We've got just the most amazing things to play with. So I feel like I'm in a little playground every single day with a bunch of smart people. So it's lovely. What I'm going to show you today, these are all new slides, and because they're new, I'm not very good at delivering them, as you'll see. And so I've tried to plan this for about 40 minutes, but the thing with new slides is I never know how long I'm going to go on for. There's about 150 slides I'm going to show very quickly, and I'll try to get it in on time. If I don't, I'm sorry, I apologize. This is just, you know, the fun of doing a new talk. And normally we would do this in person, right? I've spoken at Neocon dozens of times, and it's in Chicago at the Merchandise Mart, and it's a lot of fun, and we're in the room and there's an energy, and none of that is going to happen today. You're probably in your pajamas. You know I am. And no, I can't hear you. I can't see you. And that really stinks. But, you know, if you're feeling brave, laugh out loud. And if there's a slide that you really want to see, you can take a screenshot of it. So there's that kind of thing going on. You probably already know this because you've been trapped inside for a year. Okay. And if you want to reach out to me, you can @ me at Eric Corey-Fried, or if you want to email me, there's an email address. And then I've also built in this kind of extra feature that if you want a copy of the full deck of slides, just text the word green to that phone number, and I'll leave that phone number on the slides for you. That is not my phone number, so don't send me any weird pictures of your junk or anything like that. That's just an automated system that I use. But text the word green to that phone number, and you'll get a link to the slides, and then I'll be able to follow up with you all. Okay. So I'm here today in beautiful Portland, Oregon. And everything that you've heard is not necessarily true. It's a weird place to live, especially the last year, but it's also beautiful and wonderful. And I encourage you all to visit and then leave. Don't move here. It's also weird to talk to you after 14, 15 months of whatever it's been of us being kind of trapped indoors. And especially as we're just starting to emerge, we're just starting to come out. You know, I'm vaccinated. I can't wait to start running down the street naked and kissing strangers at this point. You know what I mean? And it's been a weird year. I've done a lot of weird things to keep myself busy. I get very antsy, you know. What did I do this year? I created these little stickers that I put on towel dispensers just to get people to make fun of themselves, right? That's kind of a new hobby of mine. I also started an art exhibit of pictures of people in Zoom that are unaware of their camera. That's kind of my new art series. You can look for that at a gallery soon. I applied to be an astronaut this year. This is true. Mostly just to be curious to see if they would take me, more than anything, really. And I haven't heard back, as you can imagine. I also applied for the Biden administration, like everybody else did. And there was a question on the application, and this is true. I don't know if you've seen this, but it said, do you identify with other communities that have been underrepresented? And as a boring white guy, I didn't know what to put, so I just put comedian. And come to think of it, I haven't heard back from them either. What else did I do? I started a podcast called Care by Design with my friend Eve, and we interview some really amazing people. And this is true. I'm not joking. All of this is true. And so I encourage you to check it out. It's just a fun thing that we do, mostly just to keep ourselves busy. And then probably the most exciting thing I did this past year was I wrote a book. And so this is actually book number 12, and it comes out next week. So this is very timely that we're doing this. And I literally just got my copies, you know, like 2 days ago. So that's my shameless book plug, but it's on the circular economy. And the reason I wrote a book about the circular economy is because I see it really as the framework we need to solve the problems that we have. That's really how I see it. And if you're not familiar with the circular economy, it's really a paradigm shifting idea. It's really about changing that paradigm of take, make, waste that we normally follow and have followed for 200 years now, and really bending those things to be into circular loops. So we, instead of take, we harvest and then make and then remake over and over and over again. And what's amazing about it is that this is the strategy that companies like Adidas and IKEA and Intel and Amazon and Patagonia are now embracing. And we were lucky enough to include all of them in the book, which is kind of wonderful. And so that was my year, you know, basically stuck inside, you know. But now it raises the question, where do we want to go from here? And that's what I want to talk to you about today. Where are we going to go from here? Because now we have an opportunity. The pandemic was a portal and an opportunity for us to redefine what normal should be. And you're starting to feel that politically, culturally, ethically, probably in lots of different ways. So I want to start with a kind of a hypothetical question for all of you, which is, what was the biggest driver of digital transformation at your company this past year? Was it your CEO had some bold vision that you all followed? Was it that your CTO had some, you know, brilliant new technology that they deployed? Or was it this little guy? Because I'm willing to bet it was that little guy. I'm willing to bet it was that little thing that forced our hand into a digital transformation. You know, at CannonDesign, we were really ready for this, right? We've got a lot of offices, but we were able to overnight switch to having 1,100 offices for each of our 1,100 employees, essentially, because we were kind of prepared for this. So that was lucky for us, but some of our clients were not so lucky. So what I want to talk to you about today are three different things. I want to talk to you about the urgency of the change that we need to make. I want to talk to you about how we need to redefine cost in a meaningful way. And I want to talk to you about how to approach this in an innovation change management strategy in a way that I think will get everybody excited and on board, using what I call the innovation as an avalanche approach to it. And we're going to go very quickly because, as I said, I've got a lot of slides and not a lot of time. So let's start with the urgency. What is so urgent about what we need to do here? And what's urgent is that the way we build our buildings is dumb. We think of the buildings as one-offs. We think of them as standalone pieces, and they are not standalone. We cannot solve this problem one building at a time because it's not just one building. That one building is tied to a network of infrastructure and embedded systems, and they all need to change. And ideally, they need to change quickly because we are about to build a lot of stuff in a very short period of time. The world's building stock is going to double in area by 2060. So in the next 40 years, we're going to build the equivalent of New York City every 5 weeks for the next 40 years. And that's just unfathomable. I mean, that size of scale of building is almost impossible to visualize. So let me try, right? This is New York, 1931. That's the Empire State Building kind of in the smog in the back, right? When I used to live in New York, the Empire State Building, I worked 2 blocks from there, and it was always became my kind of focal point and landmark. And in the last 80, 90 years, this is how New York has changed. You can't even see the Empire State Building anymore because Midtown is, well, you know, you've been there. So this is the rate of change that we're needing. So imagine that every 5 weeks being built. That's what we're doing. And if we do it the old way, the way that we've always been building, we're going to destroy the planet and make it unlivable. And I hate to be Debbie Downer about this, but that's just kind of the truth of it. And it's not just us. I don't want to make just you feel bad about yourself. It's the whole world is at this. China in the last 2 years used 50% more cement than the United States did in the entire 20th century. So you're talking about places like China and India, just because of their populations, building a lot more than we are. And that's what needs to change. Plus, we keep making crap, right? There are 4 new dollar stores open every day in the United States. Just in the United States, not in the world, 4 new dollar stores every single day in the United States. So today, that's 4 new dollar stores that opened up today. And it's basically a dollar store every 6 hours, if you think about it that way, which is frightening. And it's more, there are more dollar stores than there are Walmart, McDonald's, CVS combined. I mean, there's a lot of them. And what's weird is now that you know that, you're not going to unknow that. You're going to start seeing that everywhere. So you're welcome. Because of this, 2020 also marked a very weird turning point. For the first time in human history, global human-made mass now exceeds all living biomass. In other words, all the stuff humans make now outweighs all of the Earth's organisms. It's 1,100 gigatons of stuff, if you want to know. And that's never happened before. So remember those rollerblades that you bought and used only once? They're sitting in the closet somewhere. That's part of the human-made mass I'm talking about. Like just all that stuff, all that garbage. And so I guess that makes sense why the richest man on Earth is the guy that sells us all this stuff, right? That kind of ties together, right? Not to pick on him too much. And this is where the circular economy comes in. Because so far, the human race has really just been an exercise in using massive amounts of limited polluting energy to convert every valuable resource into toxic landfill, and doing this in just the dumbest way possible. And each of these phases is a problem. The take phase, the make phase, and the waste phase are all a problem. And none of this makes Kanye happy, by the way, just so you know. And I kind of feel like this is us. Like we're just, you know, swinging along, kind of oblivious to what's really happening, not really turning our head too much because we don't want to see it. And I feel like we've kind of been there for a while and we can't be there anymore. The truth is that every single US president since John F. Kennedy has been aware of climate change as a threat. And so we've known climate change as an existential threat officially since 1979 when the Pentagon said so. And which is why it's so wonderful today, just today, to see that Biden announced a 50% reduction in greenhouse gas emissions today in Earth Day at his climate summit. So there's some remarkable things going on, but the point is that things are changing. They will continue to change. And for some of us, these changes might be uncomfortable, really, but that's a good thing. And it's not like you can be surprised. It's not like you weren't warned. I mean, we've been secretly putting this into movies for decades, right? There's always the movie of the scientist that nobody listens to, and then New York blows up. You've seen that movie a million times. Well, I mean, you know, so don't be surprised, because this is where we are. We're here. We are at a pivotal point. We are at a fork in the road. The decisions that we make today in the next year are going to determine where we're headed. And all 4 of these outcomes are grim. Let me not sugarcoat this, right? It's just how grim do you want it to be? The one pathway is that life will be fundamentally different than what we're used to now in terms of food, in terms of civilization, in terms of travel, in terms of the coasts. But the bleaker outcome is even worse. And so there are times when I feel like we're just all happy little dinosaurs, just not really looking up, not seeing that our impending doom is coming at us. And my job is to say, hey, look up in the sky, there's something coming. And because of this, there are 5 things that I think that we need to really accept. what Jim Collins would call the brutal facts. These are my 5 most brutal facts that we're all facing today. The first one is that climate change is going to drive a price on carbon, and this ultimately will be a good thing because it'll cause us to really start to manage our carbon better. So that's good. But also that liability is going to make entire areas, whether we're talking about industries or regions, it's going to make entire areas uninsurable. And that's going to start to really change our idea of where we put things and why. Brutal fact number 3 is that concrete doesn't really have a viable low carbon solution yet. There are plenty of companies working on it. I'm going to show you a few today just very quickly, but concrete is a problem. In fact, it's kind of the elephant in the room that a lot of us don't want to talk about, but it's there and we need to. Number 4 is that material demand and just the surge of material and how much we need to build is going to require new approaches to materiality. We can't just keep harvesting wood. That's not really going to be that sustainable. So that means you're going to start to see engineered living materials, bio-based materials, materials that we grow and cultivate in a very exciting way. And now I have the hiccups. And then number 5, that technology is needed to solve these things. And we in the construction industry have not been very good with technology. We're just getting our feet wet, right? But we're going to need technology to speed up construction and to lower cost in a real scalable way. These are my 5 brutal facts that I really operate under, and then I'm really get my firm to operate under. So what does that mean? That means that there are things that we need to do all the time. And for us, I'm going to show you what my little roadmap is, and you're welcome to take this. You're welcome to edit it, revise it, whatever you need to do. But the first is that everything that we do, we're going to make it efficient and as efficient as possible. And we've really gotten efficiency down to a science with our buildings at CannonDesign. Number 2 is we're trying to get it to 0, right? 0 energy, 0 carbon, 0 waste, 0 everything if we can. It's very, very hard to do, but we're having the conversation with every client. That's the start. Number 3 is that we're going to use every tool in our little toolbox here. We have to. We can't afford to just be picky and, yeah, I don't want to do that. Like, we have to just do it on everything. We have to measure everything measurable, because if we measure it, we manage it, and we need to do it now. We can't wait. We can't put it off. We can't set a distant goal. It has to be now. It has to happen now because of the urgency of what's going on. And we have to start seeing nature as a technology to do this. These are the things, these are our guideposts of what we do as a firm with our clients. And it's a start. And as I said, take them, use them, edit them if you see fit. You can argue with me about them if you like, that's fine. But what I do know is that the construction industry is woefully behind. We've been building the same way for 200 years now, and we have no real understanding of data or insights or how to boost productivity or how to scale or how to automate or how to prefabricate in any meaningful way. And we're just scratching the surface, I feel like, recently to do this. And the more we can dive into this and understand data and insights and automation and scale, then suddenly we can lower cost and boost volume for everybody. So I think what we really need is almost like an extreme makeover carbon edition, if you really want to, think about it that way. We really need to redefine how we build, because the old way is not cutting it. And the level of scale that we need to cut to is immense. We need to be carbon neutral by 2050 at the latest, if not sooner. But that doesn't mean that we can just kind of like slowly decline. It means that we need to make 80% of our reductions in the next decade. Actually, in less than a decade, right? We have to do it by 2030. So, 8.5 years. And that's hard. To do that, that is a level of belt tightening that none of us are used to. And there's no time. We have to do it now. As we say to our clients, every 2050 plan is a today plan. If you have carbon neutrality by 2050 or 2040 or whatever date, that is a today plan. You do that today. We have clients that want to be carbon net positive by 2025. Well, that's in 44 months. So we have a month-to-month strategy of here's how you get there. So don't think we're buying ourselves any time by stating these far off distant goals. Any 2050 plan is a today plan. So if you have a climate action plan at your company, take it off the shelf, dust it off, get it open, and start doing it. And if that plan doesn't work for you, then get someone to help you to do. We're essentially leading our clients, our university clients, our healthcare clients through climate action planning to do just this. Actionable plans that can't sit on a shelf. They have to be done today. Over Christmas, I saw this tweet, and it's a great follow, by the way, if you want to follow somebody. But he wrote, he wrote this just dumb, obvious thing, but it really blew me away. And he said, we can take the carbon equivalent of taking 10 million cars off the road if we just simply take 10 million cars off the road. And I don't know why that hit me so hard. It's like, oh my God, yes, he's right. And he's right. Yeah, that's really it. Like we keep making these kind of dreamy, aspirations of things. And in truth, we just need to do the work. We need to roll up our sleeves and do the work. And I know you've heard those feel-good stories about how, CO2 levels dropped during the pandemic, and they did. They certainly did drop, right? And CO2 levels tend to drop during every crisis. That's kind of the sad fact of it, right? If we spend less and do less, then our CO2 levels go down. And during COVID, since we all stayed home, our levels dropped immensely. But the overall trend is still upward. So it's great that they dropped in 2020. They're not going to stay there. And the overall trend is still way above where it was just 10 years ago. And because of what we call the time value of carbon, we can't afford to wait until 2040 or 2050. Because as we're building that, city of New York every 5 weeks, essentially we're going to emit so much carbon up front, the embodied carbon, we call it, that we need to do it now. We can't wait, right? Just building what we're going to build in the next 10 years is going to put us on a pathway that we don't want to be on. At CannonDesign, we did this study recently, and we found that at the shutdown, our carbon emissions dropped 73%, which made sense, right? We stopped traveling, we stayed at home, we served our clients from Zoom, and our carbon levels dropped 73%. But it also saved us as a company, it saved us $2 million. And so our CEO put this out as a bonus, our carbon bonus. This year, we got a carbon bonus. Every employee got a carbon bonus because we saved money by not expending carbon. And now I'm trying to figure out how we can do that every year. And that's hard, but still, it's kind of amazing. It's the first company I've heard of that had a carbon bonus this year. So it's kind of cool. But it's really led me to this kind of inevitable, painful conclusion, right? As an architect, we are guilty of this. We're the ones that put us in this place. And so every time that we demolish a building, every time that we build one of those glass box curtain wall things that we all love so much, and every time that we're not targeting net zero, every time we do that, technically it's a form of climate denial. It is, right? It's denying the facts of the reality that's in front of us. That's the painful truth of it. And I struggle with this because I don't want to feel like a bad person. Nobody does. But every time that we agree to demolish something or, build an inefficient building, like that's what we're doing. And I struggle with this on a daily basis. And there's no easy answer other than you just got to do the work. And it's hard. And sometimes I tell people this and they get mad at me. But, I think if you think about it, it makes kind of sense. Look, here's the truth of it. We changed our planet's climate by accident. We weren't trying to, but we did. We did it all by accident. But imagine what we could accomplish if we actually tried to do something. And that's what gives me hope. That's what keeps me excited. And if nothing else, if you have no other reason to get excited, then just maybe this little news story just from a few weeks ago will get you there, which is that pollution has consequences. Let's just put it that way. And so maybe that'll get people to stand up and take notice. Okay, that was dumb. All right, so number 2, we need to redefine cost. And here's what I mean by this. We spend money on crazy things all the time, right? We build $1.6 billion stadiums that are used 8 times a year by people spending money that they don't have to watch millionaires play a game. And it's, I don't want to disparage anything, but 1.6 billion to play a game. I get it. It's fun. So we clearly have the money to spend when we want something. I was in a meeting the other day, and we're working on a project. And the client was asking, what's it going to cost to use all healthy materials, avoid all carcinogens in the building, right? We don't want to bring any cancer into the building. What's it going to cost? And I said, well, actually, it really won't cost hardly anything. The upfront cost will be about $26,000 more, but it's going to save you this, this, and this. And we had a whole life cycle calculation. And my words are still in the air. Like that $26,000 cost is still in the air in the Zoom room, right? And as it's still in the air, the client turns and says, hey, where are we with the $26 million parking garage? So we have no compunction about, $26 million for a parking garage. We're subsidizing parking for everybody, apparently for free at the tune of $26 million. But I'm nickel and diming people over healthy materials that don't cause cancer. That just seems weird. So our priorities are out of whack. So it's not about the money. It's about our perception of the money. It's also not about the actual strategy. I was in another meeting recently, unfortunately, and as a joke, I mean, it was a joke, granted, it wasn't real. But as a joke, one of the facilities guys said, "Hey, I ate a salad today. How many lead points is that going to get us?" And everybody laughed. And I was like, "Ha ha ha, very funny, guys." And the answer is actually 2. It'll get you about 2 lead points, which is, you know, so it's pretty good. But that mentality of, you know, point chasing is not the way to do it. We need to redefine return on investment. We need to redefine cost and show that these things have value. One of the amazing tricks the automotive industry did was that they got the taxpayer to pay for their infrastructure. It was kind of a remarkable thing. And I spend nights awake trying to figure out how the sustainability industry can do this. Because think about it. This year, we're going to spend $177 billion to maintain the freeways in this country. $177 billion just to maintain the existing freeways. So it's all subsidized for the automotive industry, which is great. But all told, we've spent $2.6 trillion since the Highway Act of 1956 building and maintaining those freeways. So I don't think it's about money. I think it's about convenience. I think it's about priority. The same thing in your office, right? Nobody ever asks, what is the return on investment on the free coffee and donuts that we give out? What is the return on investment on the Christmas decorations? That never comes up, right? You do it because it's the cost of doing business, because we like these things, because they give us joy. And it's the same with sustainability. Sustainability makes a better building. Why do I need to prove the return on investment for every little thing? Especially because with sustainability, ours has a payback, unlike the donuts do. So that's how we need to redefine cost. We also tend to preserve things for weird reasons, right? You've heard a lot of talk about protecting the coal industry, the poor coal industry. Well, there's 46,000 people that work in the coal industry. It's not a lot. There's more yoga instructors than there are people that work in the coal industry. And I'd rather preserve the yoga people, to be honest with you. But the real truth of it is that there's 3.3 million people that work in the clean tech industry. So if we're prioritizing industries, let's prioritize the bigger employer here. So as I said, it's not really about money. What is it about? It's about fear. Fear of change, fear of being different, fear of making a mistake, fear of doing something wrong. And I get that. I get it. It's scary to have these conversations. But this idea of chasing ROI and chasing efficiency over and over and over again in the hopes that you're going to convince people, well, it's a trap. We do it. I do it all the time, right? I calculate lifecycle costing for new systems all the time. I want the clients to make an informed decision. Absolutely. But ultimately, at the end of the day, it's a trap, because now I'm comparing one thing to something that's not getting compared at all. That's really it. So instead, we're focusing on outcome. And these are the outcomes that we give to our clients. And so I show these outcomes to our clients and I say, what are these things worth to you? What is it worth to you to retain your employees? What is it worth to you to not, have sick employees? What is it worth to you to improve test scores? And we can put a dollar value on it so they understand the context of this. I'm giving them a better building. So I don't want to go through the nickel and diming. I want to talk about value. What is the value that sustainability is providing to you? And it's changing the conversation. And I encourage you to do the same thing. Because we've talked about this for decades. You're all in the industry. You all know about this. We talk about how organizations that are happy, organizations with high happiness, how they see better returns, because happy places have happy employees, and that leads to better quality work, right? Well, it's the same thing with sustainability. Sustainability doesn't cost you money. It makes you money. Sustainability pays for itself. That's the truth of it. And so if we're getting into this game of comparisons, we have to remember that these comparisons are not ultimately fair. There are, there's orange slices, and then there's orange slices. And not all orange slices are created equal. So that's what we've been working on, right? Are we really comparing the right things? Are we really evaluating the right things? If I'm looking at the overall cost of something, am I also factoring in everything else? That's really it. In other words, are we measuring the right things so we can manage them better? Okay. In 1986, there was a nuclear accident called Chernobyl, and you probably all saw the series on HBO about it, right? That was, by the way, excellent. You should totally watch it. But one of the things that struck me about watching the series recently and hearing about what was going on at Chernobyl was that at the time they were in denial that there was a problem. And the reason that they were in denial is because the meters that they had read that they only had, that the radiation was only at 3.6. Oh, it's not a problem. It's only 3.6. 3.6 isn't that dangerous, they said. But here's the trouble. The meters only went up to 3.6. The real number was 15,000. 15,000 units of radiation, essentially. But they didn't even know because their meters were maxed out. Where are your meters maxed out? Where are the things that you're measuring, maybe not measuring the full spectrum of the impact? So if you're talking to a client about energy, are you really, using it through a very limited meter that only goes to 3.6, or has it been maxed out and you don't even know? If you're talking to a client about waste, how much is that costing them? That's what we've been doing. We've been resetting our gauges to make sure we're using the right tools to measure the right thing. The other thing that we're doing is we're also trying not to make the problem worse. In the last pandemic in 1918, you've all heard of Typhoid Mary, right? And through the 1930s in New York, Typhoid Mary was spreading typhoid, right? Well, there was also a doctor, a very famous New York City physician, who was renowned for his ability to predict when patients would get typhoid. And they would come to his office, they would line up and they would come to his office and he would touch their tongue and he would squeeze their tongue and he would say, oh yeah, this patient's gonna get typhoid. Well, it turns out he didn't have any magic ability. It turns out that he had typhoid, and every time he touched their tongue, he was infecting them, right? So he was becoming a self-fulfilling prophecy. He predicted the sickness at the same time he was giving people sickness with his hands. This is an example of how feedback that you're receiving could be reinforcing the wrong lesson. And so that's the other thing that we change with our clients is what is their feedback that they're receiving that's just reinforcing what they think they know that they don't really know. What do we need to be measuring instead to change that? And what we need to be measuring is value. Here's the truth of it. There's a potential $10 trillion worth of potential savings by the end of the century if we keep warming below 3 degrees centigrade. That's the truth of it. It'll pay us to save ourselves. That's how I see it. So we can't afford not to do this for any number of reasons. 10 trillion of potential savings just by keeping the planet livable. Imagine that. Which means that if we change what we measure and we do it right and we ask the right questions, if we can change what we measure, we can change the world. And that's exciting. So what are you measuring? How do we typically measure success in a building? Cost per square foot, revenue per square foot, payback ROI? Yes. And I'm sure we'll continue to do that, right? These are the metrics we all use to measure our success with our clients. But how should we measure the success of a building? Shouldn't we measure it also in terms of how quickly the patients recover, or how we can reduce stress in the occupants, or how we can help retain staff? Yes. And so we're starting to do that too. And then when it comes to sustainability, also maybe we should also measure how much energy we're producing. And if we're measuring how much energy we're producing, the buildings that don't produce energy will start to look as behind as they really are. If we start to measure how much CO2 we're removing, the buildings that are behind will start to show up as behind as they really are. And if we start to think of the building as a habitat and the number of species and biodiversity that we give it, the same thing will happen. If we change what we measure, we can change the world. So I invite you all to think about what are the things you should be measuring? How should you be measuring success? And this little list is a way to get you started, but these are the metrics we're now using. Right? If I put in a chilled beam system, yes, it costs more upfront, a little bit. But that chilled beam system also has an immediate payback and usually pays for itself in 5 to 7 years in terms of energy use. It also has a payback in terms of thermal comfort because the patients like it better. It also has a payback in terms of acoustics because it doesn't make any noise. It also has a payback in terms of infection control because it doesn't spread dust everywhere. And we're building in all of those paybacks too. Getting to the point, it's not about nickel and diming the ROI, but realizing the full picture of what we're doing. Which leads me to number 3, my final point, that you need to take everything as an approach to innovation. You need to lead your team through an innovation strategy. That's the way I see my role at CannonDesign. I'm director of sustainability. Well, I'm leading them through an innovation change management strategy. And I'm very open and transparent about this with everybody. I'm going to change you is what I tell my team. And, for the most part, they seem to like it. To change that means you need to bake sustainability into the entire process. You can't tack it on. You can't add it at the last minute. It needs to be in there from the start. So even at the pre-proposal stage, we're having conversations with clients before there's even an RFP about their sustainability needs and their positioning. At the kickoff, we're having discussions around sustainability and equity and resiliency at the kickoff before we've designed anything. And then that way it's baked in all the way through. We're baking sustainability into the entire process. One of the other things that I'm doing is I'm being very cognizant of listening to how I communicate this and how other people communicate it. I discovered that I'd be sitting in these meetings and everybody would start every phrase with, well, I think this, and I think that, and I think this. And then other people say, well, yeah, well, I think this. And and now that you know that I'm measuring this, you're gonna hear it all the time too. It's really annoying, actually, to sit in a meeting and see 20 people just all admit to what they're thinking. The trouble is that phrase, I think, it's a shut door on innovation. When you say, I think this, you're shutting the door to possibility. You're shutting the door to imagination. And so what I've been having our teams doing is saying, I don't want to hear what you think. I want to hear what you wonder. I want to hear what you're imagining. And so we're changing how we talk and how we express our ideas in a very bold way. And it's the most simple thing in the world, but I want you to try it. I think you'll start to see results immediately. Because the truth is that none of us are as smart as we think we are, right? There's Socrates, arguably one of the smartest people in history. And Socrates famously said, the smartest guy in history, he said, you know what? All I know is I know nothing. And there's something to that. I've met a lot of smart people in my day. I've been fortunate to work and meet with a lot of smart people. And the smarter you are, the more you realize you don't know anything, which conversely means that dumb people think they know everything. Right? And so when I hear people brag about how smart they are, it immediately tells me, maybe they're not as smart as they think. That's all I'm going to say about that. Okay. The trouble is that we deal with this stupidity all the time. There's this town in North Carolina called Woodland. Well, they banned solar panels. Why? Because they were afraid that they were going to steal and suck energy from the sun, that the plants were going to die because the solar panels were, quote, hogging all the sun. I wish I was making that up. That is not an Onion article. That's a real thing. And the worst part is that someone on the panel was a retired science teacher. And she agreed with all this. So clearly, we're not going to think our way out of this mess. You've seen this past year that people do not understand science, and trying to explain science to them is often a losing proposition. Showing them pictures of people on the beach is also not helping, right? People couldn't connect the dots between having a spring break party and then dying of COVID 2 weeks later. You think that they're suddenly going to understand science? It's not going to happen. So we need to force it on them, right? We need to just make them do it. And now we're starting to do that, and we're starting to see the benefits. Well, it's the same thing with climate change. Basically, I'm now of the mindset, I'm not going to wait for them to understand the science. Let's just force it on them, because you think people are just going to voluntarily curb their emissions. It's not going to happen. Besides, people are confused. Like I don't know what's going on with mayonnaise lately, but there's a lot of weird stuff in the world that's confusing people. And so that might be the reason why we don't understand science anymore, right? Because something's going on here. It might be the fact that we watch too much television. And I saw this ad for this thing called the Hopper, which is like a recording DVR thing. And it said that it's 2,000 hours of recording time. Well, do you realize 2,000 hours, that's a full-time job. We work 2,000 hours a year. So this thing records your entire job, essentially, worth of TV. That's too much TV. The truth of it is that innovation never looks the way you think it should look. Innovation is messy. Innovation is requiring you to roll up your sleeves. It's requiring you to ask hard questions. And if you don't understand what I mean, just remember that the inventor of the light bulb had to invent it with candlelight. That's, to me, a great analogy of how messy innovation can be, right? We don't know what it's going to look like, but it usually doesn't look the way we need it to. We need to start measuring things in a new way. We need to start looking at things in a new way and asking questions about wonder and possibility rather than your assertion of what you think. And we need innovation, otherwise you're going to go extinct. In 1955, these were the Fortune 500 companies, and since 1955, 88% of them are now gone. Why? Because they failed to innovate. They failed to stay relevant. They failed to keep up with the times. When I was growing up, Kodak was synonymous with photography. There was even a song, Paul Simon wrote a song called Kodachrome, all about this idea. Photography and Kodak were the synonyms. And now Kodak barely exists and has been replaced by a startup that is less than 10 years old called Instagram in terms of photography. If you fail to innovate, you fail to succeed. Or you fail to stay relevant, right? Which is why 96% of CEOs see innovation as a strategic priority on their list. They need to innovate to keep alive. And my childhood is littered with innovative things that I loved, things that I spent so much time with that now are no longer here because they failed to innovate, right? At one point, they held the top slot in innovation, and then they let it slip through their fingers. So innovation means that you need to keep doing it. And your organization is probably not built for innovation. It's probably not built for inventing new models. Your organization is typically built to maintain and preserve the status quo. And I get it. I totally get it. But it means that you have to choose innovation. You have to force innovation. You have to invite it in and make it happen. And if you do that and you start to empower everybody to invite innovation and offer ideas and make it a safe space for them to suggest ideas without fear, without repercussions, without judgment, right? What do you think? What do you wonder about? Well, then you can start what we call an innovation avalanche. And the reason it's an avalanche is because every snowflake contributes to the avalanche, right? The way you get innovation is not one lone person that's driving all this. The way you get innovation is you invite everybody to contribute. That's what I mean by an avalanche. And I know what I'm talking about because my company was voted the second most innovative company in North America this year. By the way, number one, I know you're wondering, number one was Chobani yogurt, which they make a nice yogurt, but it kind of, you know, it was kind of weird to lose to a yogurt company. But still, number two, that's pretty good, right? That's all right. So what have we done at Cannon? Well, we're a large architecture firm. We build 18 to 20 million square feet of stuff a year. And that might not be the right metric to measure our success. So what we're doing is we're committing to net zero energy on every project, right? Really pushing on every project. We're trying to cut embodied carbon in half by 2030 across our entire portfolio. We're doing every project with a healthy material and a resiliency strategy. Regardless of whether the clients want this or not, we're pushing it on them, really. And so we've set these 4 clear goals as our North Star or lodestar for where we need to head, and we're doing it. What we discovered is that the pain points for the client are the point where innovation begins. So asking your client, what are you sick of? What's bothering you? What's painful to you? Where are you spending money you don't want to spend money? Those pain points are the start of innovation. So ask your client what those pain points are. Map out those pain points. Hold a workshop and really map them out with everybody included. Pain points lead to innovation. Oftentimes we'll start with a provocation. Right? What if this was the healthiest hospital in the country? What if this was the healthiest school in the country? What would that look like to you? What would it mean to you? How valuable would that be to you? How would you define it? What would you imagine it would look like? What would it mean to the staff? What would it mean to the students? What would it mean to the patients? Right? We lead them through these provocations, and that opens the door to innovation. We're just welcoming it in, basically. And I remind them that, listen, don't worry about the cost because everything I'm showing you has some sort of payback. Some of it's financial, some of it is cultural, some of it is social, but everything I'm showing you has a payback. That's the truth of it. So when we talk about healthy materials in a building, right, it's not about the materials. It's about the benefit that material provides, and it has a payback. One of the other things we show them is we show them these priorities. And I ask them, you know what, I turn the control over to them and I say, move the sliders to where you want your priorities to be. And I did 100 workshops in 2020. Which sounds like a lot actually, but it's like 2 a week. It's not that many. But I did 100 workshops in 2020. And I have to say that every single time that I did a workshop, I was surprised by where they set the dials. And the project team was surprised by where they set the dials. They were not where we thought they would be based on what they had been communicating to us about the project before that. Net zero energy, carbon reduction was not mentioned at all in their RFP. And yet they would routinely put these dials way up. So now we started asking them to move other dials, right? What is your anticipated payback or return on investment for things? So things like an HVAC system, they might be willing to wait 12 or 15 years for that payback. But things like staff upgrades, they might want to see that payback in 2 or 3 years. Understandable. We start looking at their pain points. What is costing you money? What is waste costing you? What is outdated infrastructure costing you? What is food waste costing you? How much does that bug you? And that opens the door to innovation. Sometimes we talk about risks and liabilities, right? How much are these weighing on you? How much are you worried about? What's coming down the pike that you're really scared of? And that opens the door to innovation. For every project now, we're doing these resiliency dashboards, right? So we just kind of plug in a location and whip up these dashboards so we can see the risks, the climate risks that are awaiting our clients. And with these dashboards, we then can get a kind of an overall picture of what are the things we need to worry about and maybe start designing for that weren't on your radar. Some of the times we'll meet the client where they are, right? Because sometimes a client is just getting started with sustainability, so they're not going to jump into a Tesla right away. They might want to start with a Camry or a Prius to get started. I totally get that. So we offer usually sustainability in these kind of bite-sized chunks or packages, as it were. So that way we can meet them where we are, right? So if it's their first LEED Gold project ever, great. But now if they want to get to full net zero, zero embodied carbon, great. Wherever they are, we're happy to meet them, but we're going to engage them in this process. And because of that, we now have, I don't know, half a dozen projects where they are calling themselves the healthiest building they've ever done, which is it's kind of funny to have, I don't know, 6, 8 different clients that are all saying, this is the healthiest building in the country. Well, obviously, it's probably not the healthiest in the country yet, right? It's a moving bar. But I love that idea, that competition of this is going to be the healthiest building on our campus. And what is that going to mean to our staff and to our students and to our occupants and our visitors and so forth? And so we're engaging them in that conversation too. We're also helping clients through their first net zero projects. This is Ohlone College in California. Just got LEED Platinum as well. But it wasn't really about the checklist. It was really about the benefits that all these things provide. We're working on the Resnick Sustainability Center at Caltech. This will be the greenest building on their campus. This is University of Florida. This is their student health center. This will be the healthiest building they've ever done on their campus. And now we're looking at how it's going to affect the other buildings as well. This is Alumni Hall at University of Illinois. There are actually 2 buildings here across the street from each other, a renovation and a new building, and this will be the greenest building they've ever done. So it's kind of exciting. These are the tools that my team and I use on a regular hourly basis, it seems. I invite you all to use these tools. If you have other tools that you like, send them along. I'd love to hear about them. If you can't find these, let me know and I'll send them to you. I love these tools and they have evolved a lot just in the last year. They've evolved even more in the last 5 years. These are the tools we use to track embodied carbon. Tally is a plugin for Revit that we use so we can make informed decisions while we're doing the drawings. And the embodied carbon construction calculator, EC3, is a tool that we use to make informed decisions about the concrete, steel, aluminum, and other big things in the building. And just using these tools, we can cut embodied carbon in half on every project with no cost differential, which is kind of amazing. We can do all that today. Getting to zero is harder, but cutting carbon in half on our buildings is actually easy. These are also some manufacturers that I just wanted to throw out there and get on your radar. I have no affiliation with these other than I think they're great companies that make great products, but these are companies that are great at transparency. They're great at talking about material health. They're great at really explaining what's in their product so you can make an informed decision. So I like just promoting that. They probably don't know that I'm doing that. And if you're representing a company and you want to be on this list, well, then reach out and we'll put you through the ringer and see how you do. There's also an organization called erase40.org, which uses behavioral science to reduce carbon emissions with your clients, which is kind of amazing. And I'm just an advisor to them, but I love what they're doing. I'm also an advisor to this company called GEOSHIP, which makes a bioceramic material alternative to concrete. It's twice the strength and half the weight of concrete. It's kind of an amazing material, and I kind of want to just wrap myself in it all the time. But they're starting with these prefabricated domes, but the material itself is just amazing to me. This is another company called Glavel. It's foam glass gravel that's manufactured from clean recycled glass. It's a lightweight backfill, basically. That's a zero carbon backfill. And I love that idea of that very non-sexy material that probably would get pretty ignored, just suddenly being this super green thing. So check them out as well. There's also another number of technologies that I'm tracking, and I just want to make you aware of them. I have no affiliation with any of these companies. I'm just a nerd who enjoys paying attention. This one is Carbonate. They can speed up the carbonation reaction to reduce the amount of carbon in concrete. This is Solidia. They inject CO2 into the voids between the aggregate, so it becomes a carbon storage device. This is Blue Planet. They coat the aggregate with carbon. So it's a little different, right? They coat the aggregate with carbon, so they're packing carbon into that. This is Carbon Cure that injects CO2 into the water that they use in the admixture. You can see that they're all basically dancing around the same idea of using concrete as a carbon sink rather than a carbon offsetter. This is bioMASON. They take recycled stone and mix it with bacteria to perform this essentially zero carbon product. And they make these gorgeous tiles. And I have a piece, it's over there, but I have a piece, it's really beautiful. And they're on Material Bank if you want to get a sample and check it out too. It's just kind of neat. And I just love the look of it. Kind of has like a slaty, travertine kind of vibe to it. All right. This is Ecovative. This is a mushroom-based brick. They're growing bricks using fungus, specifically mycelium, but they're growing things. And so this is that start of that bio-based revolution that I told you about. And so we're tracking all of these bio-based materials that we can use. These are all zero carbon sequestering materials. And these are adding to our palette of what we're building into our buildings. Now, obviously they can't be used on every project and they don't fit for every project, but there's a lot of them. So it's kind of amazing. And what we discovered is that they all have different carbon profiles. And so if we're smarter about that up front, we can make more informed decisions around the materials that we use in the products. We're also looking at automation in a very interesting way, and we're tracking how these companies are using 3D printing and fabrication and prefabrication to do this. And we're dabbling with it, prefabricating several of our buildings and then shipping them on site and stacking them up and using that as a way to control waste and carbon emissions. There's also a number of companies that are using artificial intelligence. Again, I'm just tracking these companies. I don't have any affiliation with them, but I just wanted to get them on your radar too, so that way we can scale them up a little bit and use them. And probably the one that excites me the most is 3D printing. And I don't know why I'm so excited about 3D printing. I'm kind of obsessed with it, but that idea that we could essentially draw a building in real space is interesting. Is it scalable yet? No, not yet. But it certainly fascinates me and probably does you a little bit as well. We've also been looking at automation and how to use robots to build better buildings with more accuracy and more detail, and that's kind of incredible. Okay. And here's the harsh truth of it all, right? Since starting this talk, 1.5 million tons of CO2 have been released into the atmosphere. What are we doing today to deal with that? So I'm hoping that this talk opened your eyes a little bit to some of those possibilities, to the urgency of that, and how to use innovation as a way to deal with that. And if you could start to embrace these ideas of innovation and inviting innovation in, well, that would be the pot of gold at the end of the rainbow there. That's what that would be. And truly that would get everybody excited. Okay, so if you want the slides, as I said, text the word green to that number in the lower right there, and I'll send you the slides. If you don't have a cell phone for whatever reason, or you're just weird, you can email me or at me on Twitter and I'll send you the slides there. But otherwise, that's my time. And now I think we can take questions.
Thank you, Eric. That was a very eye-opening and really important presentation and funny. Some great slides on there. So I'm going to go through some of the questions. The first one we have here is, we keep saying we have to be more mindful of our waste, but much of the rest of the world doesn't learn about or care about the current and future climate predicaments. How can we make the change when many others will not?
Yeah, it's a great question. Well, we're all on this little rowboat called Earth, right? So there's a we, whether you like to admit it or not, right? But yeah, it's very hard to talk about sustainability when you know that things like Bitcoin mining kind of wiped out all the efficiencies of solar panels in the last year, just because it's such a processor intensive, energy intensive thing, right? Bitcoin mining. It's hard to talk about it knowing that China is going to be building so much stuff that's going to be carbon intensive. But just because someone else is not doing what they need to be doing doesn't give us permission to also equally screw off and not do it. We need to be role models to the rest of the world, and therefore we need to do it. We need to do it as a country. We need to do it as a continent. We need to do it as an economic leader, and we need to do it because we need to save ourselves. And so the reason we need to do it is because everybody needs to do it. And philosophically speaking, we need to act in accord to the principles that we want other people to follow, right? Do unto others as you'd have them do unto you, I guess is the old way to say it. So that's where the we comes from. But yeah, it can be disheartening at times.
Question, how do you inspire innovation in your clients? Do you find the financial, social, et cetera, payback are sufficient motivators, or do you find most clients want to go green but simply don't know where to start?
I think they're both true, right? The clients want to go green. They don't know where to start, and they still see green as a lost leader, right? We're going to spend this money to get green. And so there's a mindset shift that needs to occur that we do when we engage them in the project. The other thing that we always do is we show how they stack up next to their competition. And this sounds, I mean, it sounds petty and stuff, but it's actually one of the most effective things that I can do, right? If I'm working with a university and I know who their competition are, right? These other 10 universities, I'm like, well, here's what the other 10 are doing. Here's what you're doing. And we do a side-by-side comparison. And that gets them more like raring to go than any other data I can give them. So I never really sell the client on the urgency of climate change, in part because it's a downer, and but also because, you know, they either know it or they don't. I sell them on the benefits sustainability brings, and if I show them how their competition is using sustainability to differentiate themselves, then they want to as well. And so that's always a great. So this competitor analysis is something that I just do. We do it in the proposal phase now. Like, we don't even wait. We just say, here's how you're stacking up with your competition, and here's where you need to be. And it's a very powerful thing to be in a workshop and to have the provost of a university or the head of a healthcare system, a C-suite person, say, well, if we wanted to be the greenest whatever in our industry, what would that look like? And then I go, oh, funny you mention it, because I just happen to have a slide that shows you this is what it looks like. So, you know, we do a lot of prep work ahead of time, knowing that we're leading them down this path. But a lot of these workshops are us not convincing as much as leading, you know, kind of encouraging, nurturing.
There's a question, how do you make sustainability viable for individuals that are economically challenged?
Yeah, there's an environmental justice component to this, right? Just like everything else. But I don't know. I sit on the board of a nonprofit called Human Health Initiative, HHI, and we're essentially creating a curriculum for low-income families to teach them how to eat better. So it's not really about sustainability as much as it is about health, but there is a carbon component to it. And what we've discovered is they mostly make poor health decisions because they just don't know any better. Like, a lot of these kids, we go into these high schools and these kids have never seen a vegetable before. Or when they hear vegetable, they think of tomato and ketchup. That's what they think of. So we engage them in this curriculum to train them how to make more informed choices. And what we discovered is it doesn't cost more. I mean, apples are cheap if you really think about it, you know, but so are Big Macs, right? They're cheap too. So that's what we're competing against. So there are ways that you can make healthier, more informed decisions that don't necessarily cost you more. But if you want to get the bamboo hemp plates that biodegrade and all that other crap, yeah, that's going to cost, you know, but that's not the best place to start. In truth, the greenest thing that any of us can do is just cut meat out of our diet one day a week. That would be the greenest thing of any of us, more than buying a Prius. Cutting meat out of your diet one day a week and eating, you know, vegetables would not only probably be better for you, but have a huge drop in your carbon emissions.
Okay, we have a few minutes left. Here's a good question. What are the top 3 recommendations you have for the next generation of architects and designers in the quest to go green on a limited time frame?
Really ask the question, right? Push back with the clients, push back with your team, push back with your managers and your bosses. Say that this is important. Don't wait to be asked. Like, you need to be pushing for it. That's probably the best thing you can do. And also, you know, there's a little bit of extra work that we need to do, right? So every project has the opportunity to do better. And I think by taking a little bit of time to explore some of these options, other materials, other approaches, other systems, you could start to really make some positive changes. Also, the tools that I showed you in the talk today, most of them are free. So it's a great way to start to really track the operational carbon, the embodied carbon in your projects, and make drastic reductions. Mindful Materials is free. You know, go use it. That's really it, right? We have these amazing tools now that we didn't have even just 5 years ago. So using those will be a start. And if you can bake them into the process, even better.
Great. Okay, Eric, we are unfortunately out of time. We have a
Oh,
lot
no.
more questions and a lot of people asking about some of your presentation slides. So if you do have questions, we'll send an email after this out to everyone who attended, and you can reply back with some questions, and hopefully Eric will be able to answer some of those. Eric, any parting words?
Thank you all for coming. Thank you for being here. Happy Earth Day, whatever that means to you. But yeah, I'm happy to share the slides with everybody. Like I said, this is a new talk. I'm still kind of working the bugs out of it. So if there were things you didn't like, you can let me know. If there are things you did like, that's nice to hear too. Yeah, it was fun. And I hope to see you all in person next year in Chicago for the real NeoCon. But in the meantime, I'm glad we got to spend this time together. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Eric. It's been a pleasure, and we are grateful to have you in our programming series. And anyone who would like to see a recorded version, you can go to the program library on neocon.com. That's where all of our programs will be that have been part of this series and our other talk series. Eric, thank you so much again. Okay, bye-bye.